Top 7 Best Cars in the 1990s. The surprising boom of hip-hop music, the introduction of top TV series like Friends, and blockbuster movies. Does that cover the events of the 1990s? Not exactly. This was also the era when car invention enjoyed the Industrial Revolution. Hip-hop was on the trend. Good thing there were sports cars for you to hop in and play those hip. Hello everyone and welcome to AutoVerse. Let's take a fast trip down memory lane and share the top 7 best cars from the 1990s. You might want to get your 90s jacket for this one. Grandpa won't notice. 1993 Toyota Supra Mk4. We start with the Toyota Supra Mk4 from more than 30 years ago. Who doesn't like a bit of Japanese nostalgia? The 1993 Toyota Supra Mk4 is a notable icon in the Sports Car Hall of Fame when talking about Japanese contribution to the automobile world. The Japanese have undoubtedly moved on to 2050 in terms of technology, leaving us all in the past. But the Supra Mk4 is a piece of the past that gives peace to all. The brilliant 2JZ engine in this car was a twin-turbo 3.0 liter with 4 cylinders. It had a power output of 280 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. This old piece is rear-wheel drive with a 6-speed manual or 4-speed automatic transmission. What does 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds sound like? Add the top speed of 159 miles per hour to that. What do you have? The Japanese version of speed. This sports car was the foundation for Japanese sports cars for many years after its production. This is one of the most iconic cars of that time. Call us nostalgic or whatnot, but it's still one of the best. 1995 Porsche 911 Turbo S. 1995 was iconic for many reasons. Bill Gates was announced as the richest man alive, Michael Jordan came out of retirement, and yes, the highest performance full production car hit the automobile market. Yes, that was the Porsche 911 Turbo S. It was a joy to all who had a unit of this sports car in their garage. The handling of this car was top notch. It's just like Michael Jordan handling the ball. It was a case of perfect input equals perfect output. The German automaker wanted the 911 Turbo S to be a car for decades. The car had a 3.6 liter 6-cylinder turbocharged engine. You remember that handling we talked about? That is thanks to the 5-speed manual transmission with the rear-wheel drive drivetrain. If you had this sports car in the 1990s, you were probably one of the fastest humans alive if you excluded the supercars category at that time. And no doubt you were one of the coolest cruising around in it. This car was a royal pedigree at the time. The curvy exterior and classic interior of this car were proof that technology was alive at that time. The Porsche 911 Turbo S had a power output of 385 horsepower and 384 pound-feet of torque. That engine output gave a top speed of 171 miles per hour, and it can achieve 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. 2 doors, 2 seats, 4 wheels, 1 driver, a cool build, and top speed. Yes, Porsche knows how to run the automobile business. Emphasis on run. 1996 BMW Z3 Roadster. An open-roof sport car, light on the road, sleek and classic with rims that shine through any path. If that was the goal of the BMW company when they started production of the Z3 Roadster, then we can only say one thing. They delivered beyond expectations. It had the brilliant styling that was the trend of the 90s. With it came the German power. We are sure you know all about German power. This speed of an engine had a naturally aspirated 3.2 liter inline 6 engine. This engine had an output of 321 horsepower and 258 pounds-feet of torque. BMW, in its creative power, did not sacrifice its handling for power. This car was the peak of enjoyment at the time. A rear-wheel drivetrain and the 5-speed manual transmission on this cool ride aided the driving experience. A top speed of 155 miles per hour ensured that the user was never late to any of those concerts in the 1990s. And if there was ever a reach to cover a 100-meter track, the 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds acceleration puts the car in a winning position compared to other sports cars at the time. Do you know that the BMW Z3 was the company's first car to be manufactured outside of Germany? Well, now you do. This car was built in the US of A. We guess that explains why it is one of the coolest roadsters ever to run the road. 1996 Lotus Elise. The 1996 version of the Lotus Elise is what you call a car for all decades. We just call it Evergreen for short, or Everwheel, depending on how much you like puns. You could drive the 1996 Lotus Elise around the block in 2024 and you won't feel out of place. If we were in the mood to argue, we'd say the Elise was the formula for many modern roadsters you find around today. The styling is magnificent and way ahead of its time. The car had a small engine, a naturally aspirated 1.8 liter with 4 cylinders. The engine had an average output of 120 horsepower and 122 pound-feet of torque. This lightweight Roadrunner utilized the output to optimal levels. The 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds and a top speed of 126 miles per hour is proof of that output. With that speed, you're at the wheels and the open roof. What a combination! We hope you love the wind on your face because that's what you'd be having. The Lotus Elise had impressive handling to match its design. With a 5-speed transmission and power to the rear wheels, this car was a load of fun for the tracks back in those days. You should see how smooth driving around tight corners in this car is. The best part was that this was the first generation of the Elise. They surely started on the right path. 1997 Chevrolet Corvette C5. The Chevrolet Corvette C5 is our next pick on this trip to the 1990s. We are moving on to the later end of the 1990s, and it is exciting to see the changes in this period. One such notable change is the convertible feature of the Corvette C5. You could be that cool cruiser gently moving through the streets with a top covered. At this option, it has a classic cool that will have heads following you as you speed past. If you want to drop the cool act and pick up a drip character, then the open roof option is for you. Whichever is the mood, the naturally aspirated 5.7 liter V8 engine was there to assure you of its speed and power. The engine has an output of 350 horsepower and 35 pound-feet of torque. In terms of speed, the Corvette C5 could reach the 60 mile per hour mark in 4.5 seconds. But it doesn't stop there. The top speed of 174 miles per hour made it one of the fastest on the list and one of the fastest back then. When the speed lovers of the 1990s realized the capabilities of the Corvette C5, it became the standard for Chevrolet. They were held to that standard thanks to the cult following that emerged regarding this car. It was clear proof of American classics back then. 1998 Mazda MX-5 NB. We take you a year further with the Mazda MX-5 NB of 1998. The 1990s was coming to an end at this time, but the creative power was nowhere near its end. The Mazda MX-5 NB gave the sports car something different, classy, and uncomplicated. If you're a fan of the simple lifestyle, the MX-5 is a car you will find attractive in the 1990s. While most sports cars at the time focused on speed, Mazda was more interested in style, looks, and feel. And it's safe to say that they pulled it off without issues. This Miata was one for exciting thrills and easily available for all. The goal of Mazda was to build cars that were affordable for all. The NB, the second generation Miata, did not deviate from that principle. This car had a naturally aspirated 1.6 liter engine with 4 cylinders. It featured a mid-engine layout, and it was the generation to feature the factory-built turbocharged Mazda Speed. You either have a 2-door convertible or a 2-door coupe. You have a 5-speed manual transmission with a rear-wheel drivetrain. The MX-5 was not one of the fastest of this decade, as it took 9.2 seconds to reach the 60 mark. The top speed is 119 miles per hour too. Those are low numbers compared to others on the list. But the styling, the lightweight and simple design still ensure that it is one of the most iconic of its time. And we are on to our number 1 on the list. But before we get to that, here are some honorable mentions from that decade. Do you recognize these classics? Check out the 1992 Dodge Viper, the first generation of Vipers ever. It has a naturally aspirated 8-liter V10 engine. The large engine had a massive output of 406 horsepower with a top speed of 165 miles per hour. Another honorable mention is the 1991 Mazda RX-7 FD, a special sports car with a twin-turbo engine. Had an output of 239 horsepower with a top speed of 155 miles per hour and up to 60 in 5 seconds. 1998 Nissan R34 Skyline GTR. For the last car on our list for this trip, we give you the Nissan R34 Skyline GTR. You will agree that it certainly looks different and yet classy, making it a top pick for that decade. It was the 5th generation of the Skyline GTR Iconic Productions. If the third time is a charm, Imagine the 5th time. It was near perfection, a joy to have in anyone's garage then. This Roadrunner featured a turbocharged 2.6-liter engine with 4 cylinders. That engine had an output of 280 horsepower and 289 pound-feet of torque. Depending on preference and handling, you can choose the 6-speed manual or the 4-speed automatic transmission. This beauty of a car had a curb weight of 3,400 pounds. Moving with power and style, this car achieved the 0 to 60 mark in 4.6 seconds with a top speed of 156 miles per hour. This car added more heat on the road and the comparison between the Nissan Best and Toyota's street car. And it was a never-ending debate. This was also the last generation of GTR and, conveniently, the last on our list. Thanks for joining us on the trip down the 90s lane to see the best cars of the 1990s. Subscribe to AutoVerse for more trips back in time. We will be back in time for another adventure. Hit like and share your favorite from that decade in the comments. Stay tuned and keep cruising with AutoVerse for the latest updates.